Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Getting Ready for Your Zoom Close-Up, brought to you by Domain Computer Services. I'm Vinny Civitello, Communications Manager for the New Jersey Business and Industry Association. With us today is Kerry Barrett of Kerry Barrett Consulting. A few housekeeping matters before we get started. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be emailed to you within the next 24 hours, so be on the lookout for that. I'd also like to draw your attention to the questions button. Kerry would be happy to take all of your questions, so by all means, write them in as they come to you. One last thing, if you encounter any audio or video issues with GoToWebinar while you're watching this, you can try refreshing your browser, but if that doesn't work, you can always just wait for that recording and watch that and you won't miss a thing. So now let's get things started. Kerry?
Thank you, Vinny, and thank you everyone who is attending. I see you're still filtering in and filing in, so thank you very much for being here at 2:30 on a hot and steamy Wednesday afternoon. I hope that you're all ready to learn a lot of good stuff, and I hope that I can deliver. Vinny mentioned that if you have questions, please, by all means, ask them. There are certain topics that I don't dive into traditionally too much when I'm talking because they're specific and targeted questions. So if there's something you need to follow up on or whatever the case may be, and we do not get a chance to address it now during this event, I encourage you to email me post-event after this is over. My email address is up there on the screen. I believe you can all see that. It's Kerry@kerrybarrettconsulting.com, and I'd be happy to answer your questions, point you in the right direction, talk a little bit further about what your goals are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So with that said, my plan for today is to talk for about 45 minutes, although I have been known to ramble. So I'm going to do my best to keep it a little concise and allow you 10, 15 minutes-ish to ask your questions, and we'll just take them in chronological order. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. Let's get to it. We're going to talk about three things, basically, in a nutshell. More than three, but those are the three main things. We're going to talk about what your shot should look like. Now, I'm going to talk specifically about video messaging as a whole. I am more familiar with Zoom. The best practices that I will be talking about, though, are applicable across all platforms. So whether you are on Skype or Google Meet or GoTo like we are today, Zoom, whatever the case may be, these are best practices that apply to all of those platforms. Now, some of these platforms have different bells and whistles, and they may have different options. For example, Zoom has a fabulous filter that I am a big fan of that we do not have access to on GoToWebinar. And I'll talk a little bit about that. If you have specific questions about video platforms, I will do my very best to answer them. If I don't know the answer, because like I said, I am mostly familiar with Zoom. I do most of my video calls on Zoom. I will do my very best to find somebody who does know the answer and get back to you immediately. So we're going to talk about shot setup, right, and what that looks like. And again, this is across all platforms. We're then going to talk about your setup, what you look like, not only your appearance, but your messaging and delivery. And then we'll talk about some of the mistakes that we typically see when people are speaking on a webcam. So those are the three main topics, and we'll dive into each of them now. So let's talk about what that shot looks like. And I know that we've all seen this one, yes? Right, I know you have a really great view of my giant forehead and my ceiling. We have also seen this one. We have seen the up the nose shot. We've seen all that good stuff. And sometimes you want to say, have you looked in the camera and checked out what your shot looks like? Because it's a big deal. And the reason, I will say, the reason that that all of this is important, and it will seem like I'm talking about a lot of aesthetics, and I am, but these are not just aesthetics for the sake of things looking pretty. These are aesthetics with a purpose. And what I mean by that is everything that we're going to talk about today is going to allow you to amplify your message and allow you to present your best self on camera. So, you know, the adage that I bring with me from my news career is, if it distracts, it detracts, meaning it takes away from your message. So all of the visuals we're going to be talking about today are things that will help amplify your message. And at the end of the day, if video weren't important, if we weren't using it to connect with people, we'd be doing all of these things via phone and via email, and we're not. If you're like me, you're on at least 5 of these things a day, and I know you're probably sick to death of them. But it's important to present our best self. So what does the shot look like? Well, you want to avoid what I like to call dead space. And by dead space, I mean all the space around you that is not you, that is your background. And so when you see, for example, I'm going to back up now intentionally, when you see somebody who's very far away from the camera, you can see how this dead space has expanded. And that means space that does nothing to amplify your message. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about dead space. You can't see my eyes. You get a great shot of my office, but you have trouble additionally connecting with me. So in order to mitigate and diminish dead space, you want to do a couple of things. One of those things has to do with where your camera level is, right? My camera level right now, and I'm on the webcam on my laptop, is just a hair above eye level. You ideally want it at eye level or very, very slightly above. Couple of reasons for that. Number one, it's the same reason we don't see people taking selfies, bending over their phone and looking down. It's just not a flattering shot. That's why we see people take things like this. Everything looks a little bit slimmer and sleeker. But it also allows you to fill the space of your video box, right? This little box that surrounds me here is the video box. And that does a couple of things for you when your camera level is where it needs to be. One, it helps eliminate dead space. Two, it helps me connect with you by a direct line of sight from my eye into the camera. And it also additionally allows me to fill that video space, that video box. And what does that mean? Why do I want to do that? I want to do that for a couple of reasons. One, it's a super easy way to up your presence and your authority, right? Rather than being a tiny little figure in the background, you are, I don't want to say up in people's spaces. You don't want to be like this, but you are, I'm closer to you. You can see into my eyes. And so it allows you to establish more authority, more presence, more credibility, not by anything you're saying, not by anything else you're doing, just by the way you position yourself within that video box. I also like to talk about what I call the rule of thirds. I don't just call it like that, that's what it's called. And the rule of thirds is when you are setting up that video box and you're dividing the screen into 3 equal parts. The rule of thirds. Ideally, you should be sitting right in the middle. And I know that seems like it's common sense, but it's not always. And the reason that it's important when you are on video is because when you do adjust or you do move or you bend over to get something or you just shift in your seat, that can very easily knock you out of the line of sight, right, out of that video box. And while you know, when you're meeting in a conference room and you've got 10 or 15 people around the table with you, those subtle movements are not a big deal. In fact, most people don't even notice them. When your field of vision is shrunken down to this tiny little video monitor, all those little movements become hyper noticeable. And so what may seem normal in person can very quickly wear out its welcome when you are on camera. Camera can be very cruel, and we will talk about that in more detail. Trust me, I know. So when you are positioned in the center of your screen, you allow yourself a little more leeway should you need to adjust, should you need to move. You're not off screen, because one of the things that is so tiring about these video platforms is that you are the actor, the director, and the producer. So normally when you're speaking to a room of people or you're at a conference, you know, you're at a conference table, you're just the actor, you're saying the words. But now when you're in front of a video or you're in front of a webcam, you're the producer and the director, meaning you have to be constantly aware of where you are in the shot and what you're doing. It's very easy to get distracted. So giving yourself a little safe space on the sides helps mitigate some of those issues and concerns that we have and the things that we get distracted by when we see our face underneath that camera and we're distracted by our hair or where we're sitting or whatever it is we're doing. The next thing that I want to talk about is framing. And When I talk about framing, I mean how you are positioned in that shot, right? Whether you're close or far. And when you're setting up your shot, right, you have very limited range when you probably don't even have the ability to zoom in or out with a webcam. And so you adjust your framing where you are in the shot by either moving closer to the computer or further away. And you should have yourself positioned so that there's just a minimum of headroom at the top, right? You don't want your head cut off. You also don't want to see a ton of ceiling. That does nobody any favors either, nor the up in the nose shot, but just a minimum of headroom. And then the shot itself should be fairly tight, right? Like, so we're kind of, you know, shoulders and up. And when you're adjusting your shot, I'd like you to think about what you see when you look at a news anchor, a single news anchor on the desk delivering the evening news, whether for you that's Sean Hannity or Lester Holt or David Muir or whoever it is. Those shots are generally fairly tight, similar to the way I am positioned now. And that is a very deliberate setup. And the reason that those shots are set up that way is because it allows the viewer easy access to the anchor's eyes. And if I can look in your eyes and you can look in my eyes, it helps mitigate some of those challenges that we have, especially now when we can't meet anybody in person, or we haven't been able to anyway. If you can look into my eyes and you can see that I am looking at you, and you can see that I'm not shifty or that I'm not, you know, looking down or looking away constantly, it helps more quickly establish rapport, trust. You hopefully like me a little bit more, and we feel like we know one another a little bit better. I realize this is all through a monitor, it's all through a camera, and that's a tricky thing to navigate. But when somebody's able to look into your eyes, whether they're face to face or whether they're looking at them through a camera screen, or it has the effect of allowing them to feel like they know you a little bit better, right? So with that said, the next thing that I would like to talk about when it comes to your shot setup is your lighting. And I am sure that we have all seen the person who is sitting with their back to the brightest source of light in their office or their kitchen or wherever it is, and they are in silhouette. They are one digitized voice away from the witness protection program. And I use that line a lot because that's exactly what it looks like. And so, for example, when I was in the news industry, the way that we would shoot an interview subject who wanted to conceal their identity was exactly that. We'd put a bright source of light behind them, and then we would shoot them and they would be in silhouette. Now I'm exaggerating a little bit. Usually you can make out some facial features when you're on a video call, but you're certainly not doing yourself any favors when it comes to establishing credibility, when it comes to establishing the ability for someone to look into your eyes. People assume that if you are sloppy about things like that, and you don't know what you're doing on camera, right or wrong, you won't know what you're doing off camera either when it comes to your business. So here's how I suggest mitigating some of those lighting issues. And I get a lot of questions about my lighting, and I'm very lucky in the room where I have my office set. I have a lot of great natural light. So directly on the other side of this computer is a wall of windows, and it is almost floor to ceiling and wall to wall. And so even on a day where the clouds are rolling in, which is actually better because the light is diffused and makes everything look softer, I get very good light. I have light here, and then I also have an artificial light that's over on this side that keeps the lighting fairly even on both sides. So always try and sit facing the brightest source of light in the room, whether it is a lamp or a window or whatever it may be. Do not ever sit directly under a light because that casts all sorts of crazy shadows, think Skeletor and all that good stuff. It also, your eye sockets will create shadows where people can't see your eyes. Sit facing the brightest source of light. Now, I realize that most of us do not have home offices that are designed to make sure that our video calls look great and that we look great on them. So there are a couple of different things that I suggest you use to mitigate a poor lighting situation. And one of them that I use, and this is a very inexpensive option. If you have a very bad lighting situation, this will not be enough, but it's a clip-on light. And you can buy this on Amazon for $20, probably less now. They used to be on back order, they're not anymore. And all it is a light that you can click on and off on the back. I slip it over the top of my keyboard, or over of my laptop rather, and it creates a soft kind of filtered light, right? It lights evenly. You're not going to see a huge difference now because I have decent light in this room as it is, a little bit. Again, this is a $20 solution that is rechargeable and you can buy on Amazon. However, like I said, if you have a really bad lighting situation, this isn't going to be enough. This is a 3-inch ring light. What I would suggest in a bad lighting situation is a ring light, but one that is a little bit bigger. You won't be able to clip it onto the back of your laptop. However, you can stand it directly behind your laptop or your computer. It should be centered in your screen right above your webcam. And I would suggest you either go with an 8 or a 10-inch ring light. The price difference is negligible. It's going to be an extra maybe $10 or $15, but it makes a big difference. If you're not sure which one to get, I would go with the 10-inch. They're generally somewhere in the range of about $50-ish, depending on what you get and what additional features and add-ons they have. The other option, and this is the fancy option, is something called a LumiCube. And I don't know if I can put something in the chat here, but it's LumiCube. You can go to their website, lumicube.com. It is a more expensive option. It is about anywhere between $80 and $120, depending on what kind you get. Again, it attaches to the back of your computer. The reason that this is more expensive is that it has a whole bunch of different options in terms of whether you do warm light or cool light, or you want some light with a little bit of yellow in it and how bright you want it. There's a whole bunch of different things you can do with it. That's for somebody who's doing a lot of these calls and really needs to kind of up their game. If you're doing them, you know, on a somewhat regular basis, I would not suggest spending that kind of money. I would go with a 10-inch ring light and call it a day. I hope all of that makes sense. The one other piece of gear that I suggest people have, and I didn't mention this when I was talking about camera level, excuse me, is a stand. I actually have a stand that my computer sits on, and it raises my computer about 6 inches off my desk. You can find some that are adjustable. And then I raise my computer, I set my camera, and I adjust where exactly I am in the frame by moving the back of my laptop. You can use a stack of books. I know that I'm a klutz. Stand is a little bit more secure. It's got those little rubber sticky things on it, so it's less likely for me to fling my hand and knock my computer off my desk. Even perhaps more importantly though, when you are running a video app or a video platform, whether it's Zoom, GoTo, whatever the case may be on your computer will run a little hotter than usual. And so if you have it on a stand of books, it will not get the air circulation that it needs in order to bring that temperature down. So the stands that you will find are generally made of aluminum. They're either mesh or they have slots on the bottom so that it facilitates that air circulation and it helps keep your computer a little more healthy, for lack of a better word. So that's my little bit of fine print there when it comes to the stand. The stands are not expensive. They're $30, anywhere between $30 and $50, depending on whether you get one that's adjustable. If you have an expensive laptop and you do a lot of video calls, I would say that's probably the way to go rather than a stack of books. I hope that makes sense. All right, let's talk a little bit about background. And I have a lot of questions about where I should sit. Should I use a virtual background, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I will get to all of them. Again, I know we are limited in what options we have in terms of our home office setup, and we are all making do with the best that we have. So what I have behind me is a neutral wall. By neutral, I don't mean it doesn't have any decorations on it. I mean that the walls are a very light gray. And I suggest, if you have an option between sitting in a room that has a neutral background, a light gray, perhaps a pale dusty blue, maybe an off-white, and then you also have a room that has, let's say, dark navy walls, like my dining room, or red, or like a mustardy yellow, I would always go with the neutral color. And the reason, a couple of things. Number one, it allows you to pop, meaning, right, I'm wearing a dark green right now. It's actually not the best color on camera for me. It's a new dress, and had I had time to really sit down in front of the camera and take a look at what it looked like, I would not have opted to wear this. It's not a good color in this room. You can see the background looks a little off as well. And that's what color can do. So a neutral background will allow you to pop. And by that, I mean, don't wear this. If you are a woman and you're unsure of what color to wear, blue is universally flattering, and try and wear, not navy, but try and wear perhaps a bright blue, something like a bright cobalt, or even a periwinkle, or a brighter kind of cerulean blue, which is a sky blue. I only know that word because of Devil Wears Prada, which is a fabulous movie. And so it allows you to contrast with your background. Why is that important? It's important for a number of reasons. If you are in a gallery sea of faces, and you are talking to a client, or you are doing an interview, or you are being interviewed perhaps for a new job, and there's a bunch of people on the call with you, whether they're people who are interviewing you or perhaps even other potential candidates, having that pop of color allows you to stand out to them, meaning I can look at a sea of faces and everybody is wearing black and navy blue, and then, oh, look at that person. That person is wearing yellow. My eye is automatically going to be drawn to them for the duration of the call because they stand out. That pop of color works. I realize that if you are in a very buttoned up sort of industry, let's say you are in finance, or you are in some sort of banking or insurance, maybe bright yellow is not going to work for you. Jewel tones for a woman, always best. For a man, I would suggest wearing not a black suit jacket or blazer, but perhaps just a lighter blue button-up shirt, a tie if that's necessary for whom you are going to be in front of, but something that allows you to have some contrast with the background behind you. And again, this is aesthetics, but it is aesthetics with a purpose. One of the stylists, I'll never forget it, one of the stylists at NBC when I used to work there as an anchor said, the surest way to get lost in a crowd of people at a conference, a virtual conference in this case, is to wear black or navy blue, because that is what every other person is wearing. So take the opportunity to dress with intention and figure out what color it is that will allow you, facilitate you standing out from the crowd without you having to do any additional work other than put on a shirt or put on a dress or put on a blazer or whatever it is. The other thing that I will suggest about background is to give yourself a little bit of depth, right? The stigma of the home office is that's done, it's gone. So you'll see there are personal effects behind me, pictures of my kids. There is, my Emmy, although I don't like to point it out, but I'll take this opportunity to do so. And a couple of little signs, those kinds of things, right? Those things are fine to show. I mean, look through the titles on your bookshelf, make sure there's nothing inappropriate. I don't know everybody on this webinar, so there may be, but have a little bit of depth. I'm about 10 to 15 feet from the wall behind me. And why depth is important is it is visually interesting. It is much more visually appealing than being up against a plain wall. We've all seen those hostage type videos where somebody's back up against a, a white wall or a beige wall, and you can see their shadows, and you're expecting them to read something that says, "They feed me 3 times a day and treat me very well." And that's because they're up against that wall, and that's what we see. Unfortunately, when we see hostage videos, that's exactly what it looks like. So don't be a hostage. Look like you're owning your space. Look like you're owning your room. Try and put a little bit of depth between you and the wall behind you to create something that is a little more visually appealing. I hope all of that made sense. If anybody on here needs help walking through their home office, virtually, obviously, figuring out where their best shot is, I would be happy to do that. All you have to do is email me. All right, so the next thing that we are, I almost forgot virtual backgrounds. Let me make a quick mention of those. People ask me if they should do virtual backgrounds. I don't like them. And the reason that I don't like them is because the tech is somewhat lacking. And by lacking, I mean when somebody moves, half of their head chops off, or if they talk with their hands a lot, the way I do, it gives them like a claw, or chops off a couple of their fingers, or whatever the case may be. There's a little bit of a lag between the time your hand or your head moves and the background fills in. So you can either see what's behind you, or it does weird things, cuts off part of your head or your hands or whatever. So unless your space is really dreadful, I do not recommend them. If you must use a virtual background, and this is a total pain in the butt, but this is what I suggest because it is far more crisp and far more clean, is to actually order a green screen, a physical green screen from Amazon. You can buy one that's 6x9, put up, take it down in 5 minutes behind you. They generally run anywhere between $50 and $100 depending on what size you get, and you can put your logo or your branding up on that behind you, and you won't have any of those tech issues. When you see a weathercaster or weather anchor standing in front of a map and saying, "Oh, here's the high and here's the low and this is happening here, blah 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 blah," you know how crisp that image is? That's because they're standing in front of an actual physical green screen, and then all that maps and the temperatures and everything are superimposed upon it. So if you must use the virtual background, that's always my go-to. I realize it's not quite as easy to do as a virtual. If you have questions about a virtual, I'd be happy to walk you through them. Obviously, if you're talking in front of a new client, don't put yourself in outer space. Unless it's NASA, then by all means go for it. All right, let's talk about messaging and how we make sure that our message is what it needs to be. We've talked a little bit about shot setup, and that's all the physical attributes of what's around you and what you have on you in terms of your clothing. But how do you speak? What is the proper way to deliver? So there's a couple of different things. I get 3 questions all the time, and I will address those 3 specifically. One is, can I use my hands? Yes, you can use your hands. If your shot is framed correctly, you won't see a ton of your hands anyway. If you have a very loose shot, you're going to see a lot more hand motion, right? I talk with my hands a lot, and I know that if I am super conscious about not moving my hands at all, and this is especially so for people who are not comfortable on camera to begin with, they become focused on those little elements, and it stifles the rest of their authentic speech, cadence, delivery, tone. It all begins to sound a little bit stale because they're focused on perfecting this one particular part of their speech that they don't like. Unless you are doing something wildly distracting with your hands like this, use your hands as you would in normal conversation. It's perfectly fine. You don't need to sweat using your hands. The other big mistake that people make is not knowing where to look. And this is, I can't even tell you how many questions I get about this. Here's how to solve, and it's tricky because I know you're trying to read the body language of the people who may be on the monitor beneath you. You're also trying to speak directly to them. Here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to be constantly looking off the monitor, looking at your notes, looking at your computer, looking everywhere but at your monitor, right? This has, and you can see, this has the same effect as you would have when you are having a face-to-face conversation with somebody, but looking anywhere but at the camera. Okay, so here's where it gets tricky. That little green dot at the top center of your monitor is where you should be looking when you are talking, period, end of story. I realize that we don't always stare at people when we talk. And so breaking gaze to collect your thoughts or gather your thoughts or look down and take a quick note of something that you have written that you want to mention, and then looking back up, all of that is fine. But continually looking below the camera or looking off camera has the effect of making the people who are on the other side of that lens feel like you are talking either at them, down to them, or yeah, they know you're there, but they're really not interested in talking to you, so they're going to talk this way instead. So look at the camera when you are talking. When somebody else is talking, that is when you should feel absolutely 100% free to look down at the monitor. And there's a reason for that. What you miss when you are looking in the camera and talking is being able to gauge and understand people's body language, to see the reactions on the face, the way that they're sitting, the shifting in the seats, all of that other stuff. You miss that when you're looking in the lens. And I realize that's just how talking on camera is. But when they are speaking, that's when you have the opportunity to read the room, if you will. So when they are speaking, look at their faces, look at their eyes, look at the way that they're sitting, try and get a gauge on what they're actually feeling and what they're thinking as they're speaking and listening to you speak. Now, so the takeaway, you're talking, look in the camera, they're talking, look at the monitor. The one time that there is a little bit of a deviation to that is when you have an audience. So for example, I know that there are 200 some odd of you out there right now. I can't see you, but I know you're there. When you have an audience that can see you, right? It's not just a one-on-one and I can see them. Here's where it gets a little bit tricky. There's one additional step. So let's say, for example, Vinny was below me in the screen here and he was talking and I was listening to him talk and I was looking at him talk, which is what I'm modeling now. But I know that you guys are out there watching me. I'm watching Vinny. Every now and then, as Vinny is talking, I will look up at the camera. I will re-engage with the audience, nod my head, smile, whatever it is. Let them know, let you know that I recognize that you are still there and you are still listening and you are still watching, even though I'm not the one speaking right now. And then go back down and continue to try and analyze Vinny's facial expressions and body language and see if he's enjoying the talk or he's enjoying what he's saying or he's enjoying my presentation. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit tricky. It doesn't feel intuitive when you are doing it, and it takes a little bit of practice, but that's all it takes, a little bit of practice. And then you have to put it into action the next time you have a Zoom call. So let me know how that goes. The third question I get that is very common is, I feel drained when I am doing a video call, and I do, however many of these a day, and I get it. I spent 20 years on camera, like performing 6 hours a day, live TV, and this is a different kind of exhaustion. And I think there's a few reasons for that. One is we're very aware as we do this that things are different than they have been, and that brings with it its own stress and its own exhaustion and its own set of issues. Number two, there's somewhat of a cognitive dissonance. We know that you're there. I know that you're there. I can see that there are 200 plus of you there, but I can't actually see you. I can't see what you're doing. I don't know if you could be flipping me the bird for all I know. You could be doing anything and I can't gauge that. I'm talking into a black hole, and if I'm not comfortable with it, I can feel like I'm spiraling down a vortex because there's no audience for me to play off of, and that can be an energy suck. Additionally, the camera is, I mentioned, cruel, and by that I mean she amplifies all, I don't know why I made it she. He amplifies all the things that you you don't like. Hi, I have a zit. Here it is. Everybody take a look. Or I put on a couple of pounds. Trust me, the camera loves that. And what the camera mutes are all the things that you would like the camera to amplify, mainly energy. And so when you are speaking into a camera and you're already tired and you're already stressed and you're already, exhausted and you don't have a crowd to play off of or even get a reaction from, it can be very easy to let things lag. And the only thing that I can tell you about that is when you do a video call, you have got to bring it. And I mean, bring it in a way that you have never brought it to a one-to-one meeting before. You almost have to go over the top you have to go way over the top to look even remotely over the top on camera, right? So a smile, while it may feel huge on camera, it doesn't look huge. And a rapid speaking pace and a very expressive face doesn't necessarily come across that way on camera. I know this because of my TV career, and I would find myself, I would think that I was talking about a story in a very animated and passionate way, and then I would go back and I would look at the recording of the newscast, and I would see that I looked like I was half asleep, and I thought, well, that's not at all how I felt when I was delivering it. But that's what the camera does. It mutes everything. It's similar to the stage in that when somebody's on stage, whether it's an actor, an actress, they're giving a presentation, whatever, you don't speak for the people in the front row, you speak for the people in the back row. And that's what you're doing on camera as well. And so here's what I would suggest in terms of how to practice is go into a Zoom room. You can, or a Zoom meeting. You can set one up that's solo and go on Zoom and hit enter meeting, and then click record and record yourself for a minute, either giving a pitch, introducing yourself, talking about your business, hell, I don't know, talking about what you're going to do tomorrow, what you're making for dinner, whatever it is, speak about it in a way that you believe is animated and excited and passionate and is the way you would want people to receive the message. Then hit stop record and go back and look at how that delivery went and see if the way that you came across in terms of your energy is what you felt like you came across. And chances are you felt like you came off with energy way up here, but you actually came off with energy way down here. That's part of the learning curve of being on camera. And so try and calibrate, bring this up, bring that energy level up. Big smile when you start, right? It's the easiest way to connect with your audience. And if you're not taking advantage of that opportunity, you are missing out. If you'd smile when you see somebody in person, smile when you see them on camera. And it doesn't have to be, a big, goofy smile, even a slight upturn at the lips. The other thing that the camera does is it can really make you appear as if you are somewhat sour and ticked off. Again, I know this from experience. And so even if you just have a slight kind of upturn at your lips, and I realize this is very specific, it can take your facial expression, the camera does weird things to it, from looking sour or angry and just making it neutral. That's all you're trying to do, right? When you are listening to somebody is not look pissed off, unless you are, in which case feel free to emote about it. But a slight upturn to the lips makes a big difference in that facial expression. All of these things, like I said, seem like they are about aesthetics, and they are, but they're aesthetics with a reason. There's a reason I'm telling you all of this, and smile this way and use your hands this way, and it all adds up to allowing you to amplify your message in a way that people understand, are interested in. That's another thing when it comes to energy, is if the people on the other side of the camera, right, if you're bored with what you're saying, trust me, they are too, because they've sat through 6 of these today as well, and they want you to captivate them, and they want to be sitting on the edge of their seat, and they want to be interested in what it is you are saying. So make them interested in what it is you are saying, but there's some very strategic ways that you have to go about doing that. Part of it's your shot setup, part of it's your energy, and part of it is your messaging. And to that end, I'm going to try and wrap up here in about 5 minutes and allow you guys a little bit of time to ask me questions should you have any. And I hope that you do, whether they're about gear or messaging or delivery or whatever the case may be. Ask anything. One of the things that I just lost my train of thought. I was going to talk about smiling. I was going to talk about background. See, this happens. And this is another thing. The show must go on. You have to keep things going even when everything goes south. Oh, that's exactly what I was going to talk about. I was going to talk about tech issues. Thank you. So one of the things that many of us are struggling right now with is tech. And there's a couple, right? You have a lag, two people are talking over one another. How do you handle? There's not a technology that can account for manners or being a conscious and conscientious communicator. So if you have two people who are talking at the same time, this is not a moment where people can hear both of you the way they could if they were sitting around a conference table. They will either hear one of you or they will hear none of you. So honestly, you have to look into the camera, notice when someone else is speaking, and stand down and allow that person to finish. If you are having issues with tech, your internet connection is spotty, people are, your image is freezing. First of all, make sure that nobody on your house is on Wi-Fi. That means no streaming TV, no Spotify, no Pandora, no iPads, none of that, right? All of that stuff has to be shut down if you have issues with internet connection, which I do, which is why everybody's angry at me right now and are instead outside. And the second thing that you can do is if you are having an issue, people are much more likely to forgive poor video than they are poor audio. If they can still hear you, but they can't quite see you, they're going to be willing to stick around. If they can't hear you, forget it. So if you're having tech issues, the one thing that I suggest is cutting your webcam. That generally will free up a little bit of bandwidth and will allow, hopefully, your audio to clarify and solidify and improve in quality. You can ask whomever is on the other side if their webcam is going to do the same thing and just speak with audio. I know it kind of defeats the purpose. You may as well get on a phone call at that point, but that is one way to try and mitigate some of those tech issues. I hope that all of this made sense. I hope that you were able to take something away from what I spoke about. I'm going to open up the floor right now for questions if we have any, and there'll probably be some other little tidbits that will come along to me as we're in the process of getting some of these questions answered. And again, a reminder that if we are going through the questions and we don't get to yours, please email me and I will be happy to walk you through any issues or whatever it is, any guidance that I can provide for you. Do we have questions, Vinny?
Definitely. Now I'm really self-conscious. I want to kind of make sure that I've got my 2 inches above here, or whatever, line this up really perfect.
You look beautiful.
Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. So the first question that came through was if you recommend on Zoom, you mentioned the profile picture that you can have.
Yes.
Do you recommend having that up when you're not talking?
Absolutely. So yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned that. And that reminds me of something else that I'd like to talk about with Zoom as well. And that's the touch up my appearance button. Okay, so yes, one of the things that many people don't do, and you'll see this when they cut their webcam, is that they, it's just their name, or it's, sometimes not even their name, sometimes it's just a phone number. When you are creating a profile on a video platform, I always suggest populating that little box that says profile picture or avatar or whatever with a headshot of yourself. Hopefully professional headshot of yourself. There's a few reasons for that. Number one, when you are in front of perhaps a new client, and obviously unless you're having tech issues, you wouldn't do this if it's just a one-on-one. But if you are with a new client, or you're talking to a boss, or you're courting somebody as a potential client, you always want to be reinforcing, especially because we can't meet face-to-face right now. You want to reinforce your name and your face. So if I have to cut my webcam for whatever reason, my dog is barking at the door, or there's a delivery, and whatever happens when we're all working from home, we know it's a crapshoot, whatever's going to go on that day as you're on your video call. When you cut your webcam, a profile picture should automatically populate. And what that does is it reinforces for whomever is on the other side of the camera the fact that you are still there. They continue to recognize your face with your name, and your presence is known, right? You haven't left the meeting, allegedly. You are still there. And so that's an important way to reinforce who you are, especially if you're dealing with perhaps a new boss, if you have a new job or a new client or a potential client. Which brings me to the follow-up that I forgot to mention, and I'm glad you mentioned this, Vinny. On Zoom, this is a fan favorite. On Zoom, there is a filter, and I don't mean a whiskers on cat ear kind of filter. There is a filter that will make it look like you have slept and you are not stressed out and you are well hydrated and perhaps even younger than you are. So I'm going to walk you through that process right now. We are not on Zoom. It is very, very easy to do. On the bottom left-hand side of your Zoom box, you will see a camera and you will see a microphone. To the right of that camera, there will be a little caret, and it's an icon of a camera, and then there's a little, an up arrow caret. Click on that up arrow caret and you will see 4 options. And at the very bottom, you will see one that says video settings. You click on video settings, it will bring up, there's literally 4 steps to this. It will bring up a white box in the middle of your screen, and video will be highlighted. And in the middle, there'll be a list of options. It'll say video settings, and it'll say, HD, SD, optimize video settings, whatever. The 4th box down will say touch up my appearance. Click on that touch up my appearance box, and don't ever unclick it anytime you're on a Zoom call, because it does wonderful things. And one of the things that's important to recognize when you're on camera is that it's very easy to be self-critical, and it's very easy to get distracted by the flaws that we perceive and what we think other people think about those flaws, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just one of those little add-ons that hopefully helps you feel a little more comfortable and confident in your own skin when you are on camera, not only with what you are seeing, but with what other people are seeing as well. So thank you to whomever asked that question.
Next
Do we have
one up.
another? Yes.
We have a bunch.
Okay.
Do you recommend a really made up face or natural makeup for Zoom?
Listen, don't ever put on a costume. I say the same thing about clothes. Meet your audience where you are. If you're meeting with a bunch of construction guys in association, forego the 3-piece suit. So don't wear a costume. That said, as I mentioned, the camera does cruel things. And so for a woman, even if you are not super comfortable with a lot of makeup, any makeup, there's a few things that I always recommend. Number 1 is brows. I know it doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you don't see brows on somebody, you're aware that there's something missing. Their face looks naked almost. I don't wear brows when I'm not on camera. I don't draw them on. I draw them on every time I'm on camera because it makes that much of a difference. And it's not a lot, but it's enough that you're not aware that there's something missing on my face. The next thing I wear at least is a little bit of mascara. Eyes recede, especially because they're already recessed in the face. And so adding a little bit of definition to them helps them from fading out. Same to your lips. Not a dark color, but not a super nude color either. Like just a kind of a classic Bobbi Brown color, the the brownish pink. It just helps you not look washed out. There's a million other tricks to on-camera makeup. I always wear blush because it adds some contouring, and I like the way that it looks on camera, but there are some different techniques for applying that apply to on camera that are different than on person. My on camera makeup is always much, much heavier than it is in person, even if it doesn't look like I'm wearing a ton, although I do feel like my under eyes are a little bit heavy today. Side note. But brows, lashes, and lips are what I always recommend. If you're not super comfortable with lots of makeup or application techniques, those are usually things you can't screw up too bad.
Next one up, where do you recommend placing a ring light?
So if you're going to do a ring light with your computer, if you don't have one of these little clip-on ones, right? The clip-on ones goes right over the top of your computer monitor, and the camera sticks out right here in the middle. If you are going to use a larger ring light because you have a lighting situation and not a good one, I suggest standing it directly behind your computer. And so hopefully you have a desk that has a little bit of depth to it, and you can pull your computer forward if you need to, and then stand it up right behind your computer and have the ring light directly centered on your monitor directly above the camera. An 8 or 10-inch ring light should suffice for most situations. If you buy one and you feel like it's not enough, the next size up for a ring light is generally 18 inches. And that is a huge gadget with a big tripod, and you'd have to actually put it down on the floor behind your desk, which is, you know, I'm not against that. Absolutely, you can do that. Some people's space doesn't allow for that kind of thing. The one other option, and this is a little more expensive, is to buy and I have one of these, it's in a box, otherwise I'd grab it for you and show it, but I can certainly send you a link. I bought it on Amazon for about $60. It is actually a kind of a dual pronged ring light, and so both lights are set in the same base. They have a flexible stand on each of them, a flexible it's not a stand, but the wire or whatever that they attach to. And then there's two 10-inch ring lights. And so when I set those up, if I'm doing an interview that this room is completely black because it's nighttime outside, which is an issue in the winter, I set that up, and then the ring lights go up almost on either side of my computer, and that adds two 10-inch ring lights. It's not as big and bulky as an 18-inch one. It's a little more expensive, but it allows me to fit it behind my computer and use it when times are desperate.
Our next question is, my office is now in the basement with fluorescent overhead lights. What's the best lighting option for me?
Dear, oh, that is unfortunate. And I know you're not the only one. There's a lot of us that are in that situation. I feel for you. Fluorescent lighting is tough, especially when it is overhead. So here's what I suggest. There's three things. One is, if you can adjust your desk at all so that you're at least not sitting directly under one of those fluorescent lights. If you're in between two, at the very least, it will be less harsh. That may take a little bit of logistical maneuvering with your desk or your computer, or at the very least your chair. Sometimes it's just a matter of angling yourself so that you can sit between two lights. If you do have any source of light that you can face, even if it's a window that's a small window up near the top of your ceiling, if you can sit a distance away from it and face it, that will help. The only other option is to buy a ring light. And I have a dear friend of mine who is now working from home in the exact same situation. She purchased one of the larger ring lights, I believe the 18-inch, and that's plenty. She's again, she's got dark walls, the whole shebang. So purchasing one good large ring light should be enough to counterbalance whatever lighting issues you have, even if you are in your basement. And it may be as simple as I had to turn off the fluorescent lights and just have the ring light on if the fluorescents are causing crazy shadows or the lights are two different temperatures. That's getting a little more techie, but put both on, sit in front of your computer, take a screenshot, and then take a look at it.
This might be a fairly specific question, but I'm going to ask it because I think it could send you in a decent direction here.
Okay.
Our question is, what do you do if you have a black uniform? She asked that when you were talking about, wearing the popping colors and whatnot.
Right.
Maybe you don't have the uniform specifically, but if, for anybody, what if you do if you're kind of constrained in what you can wear?
If you are, well, so if you are constrained and you have to wear the black uniform, black, unfortunately, black and white are the two colors I suggest everybody always stay away from when they're on camera, because black makes bad lighting worse. Same for white. And although black is generally what we like to consider slimming, if you are in a bad lighting situation, it can actually look kind of bulky because you can't see like where your torso ends and your arm begins, and you end up looking like a big kind of black blob. My suggestion, without knowing exactly what business you are in and how strict they are about what sort of accessories or add-ons you can add to your uniform, would be this. If you can add, I generally say don't ever wear a scarf because it's fussy and it provides a lot of opportunity for things to go haywire and get distracting. But if you can add a scarf that has some color to it, I would. If it is a bulky uniform, if you can add a belt around the waist to try and create a little bit of definition so you don't look, even if you're super slender and petite, black can be tricky, especially if it's a bulky uniform. Try and add a belt to it. The other suggestion that I make is make sure that your background lighting is as spectacular as you can make it, and that there is contrast between you and whatever there is behind you. Even a little bit of color. I'm going to address this as if it's a woman. I don't know if it is, but if you can put a brighter color on your lips just to create a little bit of distraction from the black, I suggest adding color that way, adding color in any way that you can. But if you have additional questions or you want to talk further about like your specific industry, please email me. I'd be happy to take a look at your uniform on camera and give you some guidance.
What tips do you have about the speaker's volume and pace of speech?
That's a good question. And it varies. It varies depending on what you're talking about and who your audience is. If you're talking about something that's very somber, you're addressing, issues, health issues with COVID and Corona, your pitch and cadence is going to be a little bit different than if you're talking about motivation and gratitude. And so you always have to calibrate your message and the delivery of that message with your audience. One thing that I think people put a lot of stress on is the actual words that are coming out of their mouth. Realize though that words punch down and body language punches up. So it is the facial expression, it is the posture, it is the pitch, the cadence, and the tone that are important. That takes a little bit of practice, because what is a normal rate of speed for an in-person presentation or a pitch will be boring on camera, and people can process many more words per minute than they can speak, and realize that when someone's at home, there's a billion other distractions. They're tired of sitting on a video call. So you have to calibrate your pitch, pacing, and tone, not just for the content of your speech, but also for the fact that your audience is probably tired of being wherever it is that they're sitting. This is a question that is way more in depth than I can give an appropriate answer to here without making some strong assumptions about audience. So whomever asked that, I would really love to talk to you offline or post event about specifically what it is you're talking about and what you have questions about, and give you some more direct guidance. You got to calibrate it for your audience, though. That's the best answer I can give that applies to everybody.
I know you have a 3:30 stop. We probably only have time for one more, but I'm going to try to sneak this last one in here.
Okay.
So the question relates to having glasses, and it being hard to see their eyes, but when they take it off, then they can't see. What kind of advice would you have for that?
Oh my gosh, I get this question every single time, and it is a tricky one because there's only
And I'm
a
glad I
few
asked
things
it.
you can do, right? Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you did too, Vinny. I wish I had a magic bullet for this answer, and there's really not one. Obviously, the anti-glare lens coating is important. Sometimes it's just a matter of either shifting your light or shifting your glasses a little bit so that they're not in direct line with whatever light it is that is shining into your eyes. Where that gets tricky though is that you can't step away from the computer, and that's usually the source anyway, the closest source of light that's reflecting off of your glasses. So you're stuck in some ways. The one thing that I can suggest outside of reflective coating on your glasses is to buy a similar sort of coating that you can place on your computer screen. It is almost like a privacy screen, but not really. You can buy it on Amazon. It sticks onto your computer monitor just the way that a protective coating would, a screen protector on your phone, and it does reduce some of the glare. It's not expensive. You just need to make sure that whatever you have or whatever you purchase fits where your camera is on your computer and where your microphone is and all that other good stuff. But those are really the only two purchase options that I can suggest when it comes to reflection on glasses. I know it's a beast. You can't take them off. Don't take them off. If you can't see, you're not doing anybody any favors.
Well, thanks again.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you to everybody who was here today. I appreciate you guys inviting me. I hope that everybody was able to get some great information out of this. And again, if you have questions, I would love to talk to you offline about how I can help you navigate this. Even if you don't have an on-camera career, you do now. So I'd like to help you with that.
All right, well, to everyone, don't forget, all of you will be receiving a recording of today's webinar via email within the next 24 hours. Lastly, when you close out of the webinar, a survey will come up on your screen that we hope you'll fill out so we can best understand how to provide you important information in a webinar. Our next webinar, Temperature Checks and More, What You Need to Know About Workplace Health and Screenings, will take place Tuesday at 9. So by all means, feel free to register for that one on our website at njbia.org/webinars. And by all means, check out Domain Computer Services, our sponsor for today, for all your IT needs at go-domain.com. So until next time, for Kerry Barrett, this is Vinny Civitello, thanking you for being with us and wishing you a great day.
Thank you.